Hey guys, Sandro here from Carcraft Auto Detailing in Melbourne. In a recent video I did, I covered the various scratches that you may be faced with correcting when restoring a car's paint. In today's video, I want to go through some of the techniques and specific light sources I use to expose these defects and detail vehicles in general. Firstly, I want to say that my defect spotting lights have allowed me to improve the way I detail, perhaps more so than any other single piece of equipment I own. You simply can't correct defects in paint that you can't see, and part of it is having enough light to illuminate them, but also not too much light so that they are washed away with over flooding the paint. But when the light source you use, together with your technique, perfectly exposes every little imperfection, it allows you to improve as a detailer and step up your game and strive for perfection if that's the goal you're looking to achieve. The truth is that there is no single light source that best exposes all defects that you can potentially encounter on automotive paint. Different controlled light beams, varying light temperatures, and differently positioned light sources all expose various defects at various levels. So ultimately, a variety of lights, including spot beams, floodlights, and fluorescents, all differently positioned in relation to distance and angles, is really the ultimate defect spotting setup. And being able to block out all other lights and switch between these light sources independently is what is really going to best expose the individual and different defects that a vehicle's paint contains. Now, that's the ultimate light source and the fantasy setup for many of us. But just because you don't have the funds to spend many thousands of dollars on lighting, it doesn't mean that you can't have an extremely effective lighting setup that can work for both mobile and a fixed garage location for just a fraction of the price. It's more about understanding how to select the lights that are more effective at spotting paint scratches and defects, and then knowing how to get the most out of them, as well as using and training your eyes to pick up on the various paint imperfections. You may think, well, if I can't see these minor defects, then why bother trying to detect and remove them? The reason is that a light source everyone has access to is the sun, and it's actually an amazing defect spotting light in its own right. However, unlike a man-made light source, you can't control it, move it around, dim or brighten it. But when the sun is shining a certain way, and your vehicle is positioned in a certain way, and your eyes are catching the light's reflection of the paint in a certain way, it will expose all the defects that are on a car's paint that you just couldn't previously see. The other reason is gloss and clarity. Although you may not be able to see and detect minor scratches, such as haze and micro marring, they will greatly limit and reduce the paint's ability to shine and cleanly reflect light to its full potential. And that is really what separates a good paint correction job from a great one. So let's get a little more specific into light sources, starting with pen or pocket lights. The one I have at the moment is the Nava rechargeable pocket LED. It's actually a very durable, water resistant and robust light, with rubber housing and both single spot beam and floodlight. It actually has the longest battery life of any pen torch I've used, with a good 5 to 6 hours of juice between charges and a handy magnet and clip for storage or use. Now, I have had a few pocket lights in my time. Overall, these small torches are really handy lights to have, but the truth is that unless you're in a somewhat dark environment, they all tend to be quite limited in their effectiveness. So you really need to have the car in the shade or a dark cloudy day in order to make use of these lights. And if indoors, you really need a dark environment to get any substantial defect spotting abilities out of them. One good thing, however, is that because of their lower lumen output, you can actually bring them quite close to the paint when inspecting its condition. I honestly don't feel you need to pay over $100 for one of these pocket lights, as some brands cost. This Nava pocket light was about $35, and I honestly feel that it's better than the $100+ I paid for the detailing brand ones. Plus, the secondary floodlight is really handy for inspecting things like wheel wells, interiors, and even paint in certain circumstances. Personally, these lights are all about convenience, rather than having the best light source. But if you're working at a fixed location, shop, or home garage, I'd personally be putting my money towards a more capable light. Next up is your more handheld work inspection lights. Most of these work lights are really focused on producing a lot of light in a smaller device, and they tend to achieve this by using half a dozen or more tiny LED globes to generate that overall brightness. This Energizer Hardcase Pro LED work light is a good example of these many handheld work torches available. It has 2 levels of brightness with a decent 350 lumens at its brightest, 6 hours plus of battery life, although it's not rechargeable, and a great robust housing that can take a bit of punishment, together with built-in magnets and a great ergonomic handle. At about $35, it really is a great handy flood torch that can actually spot defects such as random isolated deepened scratches and swirls. However, when you want to step it up to the higher end of paint correction, this torch and many other similar work lights will struggle to detect your finer defects such as haze, marring, and your finer random scratches. It comes down to the many individual LED globes that placed together in these work lights tend to flood the paint and wash away the less obvious defects. My advice once again is to put your money towards a more capable defect spotting light that can not only show the more obvious defects such as these multi-LED work lights do, but also expose the less obvious ones. Ultimately, in my experience, LED lights with a single globe are the way to go if you really are interested in detecting as many defects as possible on car paint. As far as handheld torches go, and the massive versatility that it offers, it really is hard to beat the ScanGrip Sunmatch 2. Don't get me wrong, at as $250, it is one very expensive handheld light. But when you look at everything that it offers and achieves, it really does deliver a whole lot to justify its premium price. For starters, you have 2 brightness settings of 250 and 500 lumens, but even more so impressive is the 2 light temperature settings of 4500 kelvins and 6500 kelvins. This comes down to being able to spot the most defects as possible on particular paints. White and lighter paints will reflect and bounce much more light than your darker paints, so it's a lot easier to flood the source with both too much brightness and too much whiteness in the light. So having these options to tune the light to the particular paint is a massive advantage in my experience. But delve a little further into the features of this light and you then begin to understand why it's both so expensive and how well it's been thought out. The magnetic stand with the tilt feature is just brilliant and opens up a lot more options in positioning the torch hands-free. The rubber housing provides a great feel and added protection, while the handy double hooks for both storage and positioning are again great features to have. The battery life indicator is extremely handy to have, as is the charging dock it comes with. Now to the one thing that is a downside in my opinion, and that's the battery life itself. 2 hours of battery life at half power and only 1 hour at full power is a little short compared to any of my other battery lights. And it's frustrating when the light goes out, as it's a good 4 hours to charge it up again. It feels like it's really less than the stated 1 to 2 hours of life in my experience. And I really hope that a better, longer battery life is on the table for future models. One type of lights that are perhaps hugely underestimated in the detailing world are headlamps. I've had my Coast HL7 headlamp for a couple of years now, and I've really come to depend on it so much. With massive adjustable features such as 4 all the way up to 285 lumens of brightness, flood to spot beam dialing, tilt function, and a long battery life that sees it working for days on end on a single set of batteries. But the fact that they are completely hands-free and always shining in your direct line of vision is what really makes them so handy. And at $75 or so, it's a great investment in my opinion. Now, a lot of these headlamps tend to be non-adjustable flood beams, which for interior cleaning and engine bays is fine. But if you want a headlamp that can also help you during the paint correction stage, I do highly recommend you go for something like this that has an adjustable spot beam and tilt function that can enable you to tune and direct it for spotting paint defects as well. Also, I do believe that this model now comes as a rechargeable unit, which should help save money on batteries. But there are really so many other brands and models out there to choose from, and although you may feel you look a little ridiculous with one of these on, it really is a time-saving tool that has so many benefits and advantages in the detailing world. Overall, I would say that my headlamp is a definite step up on any pen light and most handheld work lights I've ever used, but not quite as good at spotting defects as the Scan Grip Sunmatch 2 or my Hella Nova 20 work lights. So onto my Hella Nova 20 work lights. These really are the lights that first opened my eyes to the many paint imperfections that I just couldn't previously see. At about $220 each, they have a dual brightness output of 800 and 1500 lumens, up to 6 hours battery life, and the added bonus of being both battery and power corded operated with a handy 5-meter cord. They are extremely robust and durable, and at 2 kilos each, can also be used as handheld lights, but you can also set them on the ground with the adjustable back-end stand or quick mount them to the Nova light stands. Ultimately, as I stated before, the single spot beam LED with a small lens are really the best overall light sources when it comes to paint correction. And these type of LED work lights that are also the same basic design as the larger Scan Grip lights are, in my opinion, the way to go if your main goal is spotting as many defects on paint as possible. Now, these older Hella Nova lights are actually quite hard to find now, as they have been replaced with the newer models, which I have tried and worked with as well. The newer ones are a little more expensive, bigger and heavier, and as far as performance goes, they offer greater versatility with a few more added features like more adjustable brightness levels and remote control via a phone app. And the main reason I chose the Novas was that they were about half the price of the Scan Grip, with just as good performance overall, although a slight advantage must be given to the Scan Grips due to their colour temperature matching abilities. The other great thing about these lights in general is that unlike many other lights, they are powerful enough to work outdoors and highlight defects even on sunny days where most other lights would struggle. So overall, I have to say that my Nova 20s are still the best detailing defect spotting lights I've ever used. I'm going to also add these LED tube lights to the list. Although these really aren't great for paint correction in particular, I do think that as a cordless mobile lighting solution, they are great. I found these on special at Bunnings Warehouse for about $40 each. And the great thing about them is the fact that they can be propped up on their tripod as work lights. They can also be mounted via their magnetic ends, and best of all, the ends screw out with additional plastic hooks, so you can safely hang them in many areas of a vehicle, such as the roof of an interior for detailing and the inside of a car hood for engine bay cleaning. They have a good 2 to 4 hours of continuous light with 2 brightness settings and can be recharged quite quickly on 12-volt cigarette lighter outlets or a standard power point, all included with the lights. They take up very little space, way close to nothing, and are a really great space-saving option, especially for mobile detailing when you're working in dark environments or overcast days. Lastly are your more standard work light stands. These tend to be more floodlight beams for illuminating your work area, and if your workspace is a little low in lighting, a couple of sets of these can really help brighten your work area and take the strain off your eyes. These particular ones are Alex, with 20 watt LED globes, producing 2700 lumens and costing about $60 each. Now, as a more flood beam, they are great at lighting up the side of a car, but as far as defect imperfections go, they really aren't the best for that purpose. However, it doesn't mean that they are useless in that respect. It just means that they aren't as good as the Novas or Scan Grips. But if you have the space to set them back a good 2 to 3 meters so that they aren't flooding the paint, you'll find that they and many other brighter floodlights can actually be quite good at highlighting scratches and defects. It's like I said at the beginning, it's not just about having the best workspace and light sources. It's about working with what you have and understanding how to get the most out of them. Overhead fluorescent lights, for example, are fantastic for applying coatings and your wax and sealants, as they tend to show any high spots or any sections you may have missed on the wipe-off. Whereas when you're trying to spot haze or micro-marring on paint, it's really best to turn them off, as they tend to hide those defects. Overall, when first starting out, most people will place or hold their lights too close to the paint, which actually hides and washes away most defects. So learning to distance your lights and find that sweet spot that illuminates the imperfections without being too bright or too dim is key in using your lights to their full potential, whatever lights you may have. And understanding that your lower lumen brightness lights need to be shined closer to the paint and your brighter lumen lights need to be distanced, as well as the difference in how light bounces and reacts on lighter paints as opposed to darker paints, is also a vital learning process. Your viewing angle of the paint in relation to your light source is another extremely important factor. As a general rule, having your work lights positioned directly opposite you, for the most part, will illuminate defects far better than positioning your lights behind you. But like I said earlier, different defects are exposed to certain levels depending on the specific lighting. So no one light source or positioning angle is best for spotting every single defect. But most important of all is understanding how and what to focus your eyes on when inspecting the paint with your light sources. Overall, you're not focusing on the surface of the paint as much as you are focusing on the reflection of the light. It may be a little hard to explain, but you want to be looking at the light beam's reflection rather than the surface of the paint, as the light source reflection will be what really shows the defects you're trying to spot, rather than the surface itself. One other thing that I'll lastly add is that I've had the opportunity to visit and work in a few great detailing studios with amazing light setups. And even though my video camera is seriously struggling to focus and capture what my eyes are detecting, there is nothing in my experience that shows more defects more clearly than placing the vehicle in total darkness and using a single handheld light source such as a scan grip or halonovas to expose every little defect that you just can't see in a bright multi-lit environment, including sunlight. And that's a very cheap alternative to an expensive light setup with even better defect spotting abilities. Now, I'm not saying that turning off or shutting out all the light every time you want to check the paint and your progress is an efficient way to work. But when possible, I use this method to do a final inspection before putting away my polishes. And more often than not, I will find imperfections on the car's paint that I just couldn't see before. Just like all areas of automotive detailing, being able to spot and identify paint defects is something that takes time to master, especially when you truly are trying to chase perfection in your work. But the double-edged sword is that once you have trained your eyes to see even the most minute defects, you can never unsee them again, especially on your own cars. I really hope this video helps some of you out there in the detailing world. Please like, comment and subscribe to show your support. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.